Hi guys! For this week's new release video, I am using this stamp from Blue Night Rubber Stamps called Better Things Ahead. I love it's a silhouette stamp. You have this young lady walking up the mountain with her dog behind her. And we're going to do some Distress ink blending to make the background scene here. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I did is I am using some Bristol Ultra Smooth, smooth surface here. This is from Strathmore. You can pick this up at your big box stores or your art stores. I have this cut down to 5 1/4 by 4. Okay, and the colors that I have picked out today are super light pastel colors. So I have Spun Sugar, Squeezed Lemonade, and Tumbled Glass in regular Distress inks. You could also use your Distress Oxide inks. Actually, you could use almost any inks. This paper makes it super easy to blend and smooth the colors out. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of eyeball my placement here of the stamp. I kind of want this to look like she's kind of climbing up the mountain. The sun's about to rise. So I have this little masking circle here. It's just cut out of masking paper, and I want that to look like my sun. So we're going to put that down in place there. And I'm going to start with the Spun Sugar. And like I said, I specifically chose Bristol Smooth because when it comes to blending, I just think that it just looks a lot, or it just makes it a lot easier to blend the colors together. You don't have a lot of the streakiness. It's just very smooth. Then we're going to move into Squeezed Lemonade. And it's okay to blend a little bit of that in with the Spun Sugar. And then before I go into the last color, which is the Tumbled Glass, let me wipe my ink colors off the mat here. I'm going to grab the Cloud Stencil. This is also from Blue Night Rubber Stamps. And I want to add just some light clouds when I stencil this blue ink in. Like that. Okay, that looks really cool. I'm going to leave that alone. I don't want to add any more to that. Okay, so that is the hard part. Just gets easier from here. Okay, so we're going to use our Mini Misty. I like using some kind of stamp positioning tool because, again, these are solid images. We want to have as much of that silhouette image as we can. We're going to put this down in the bottom right corner. We're going to tuck our stamp into the bottom right corner. And then you can put a magnet if you need to. I have some of that Ranger double sticky tape back there. Okay. And I am going to release my mask at this point because I do want to stamp over that. And then if you want to, you can go in with just your sponge and kind of lightly put the yellow in there. You don't want to do too much color because you want it to be lighter than your background, but just put a little bit of color in there. There we go. So now when we stamp over it, we'll have that little bit of sun coming up. All right, I am going to clean this stamp real quick just because it is a brand new stamp. part of the brand new January release. You can check them out at BlueKnightRubberStamps.com. I will have videos all month showcasing the new stamp release. Also check out our blog. We have the other design team members will also have their cards and ideas. All right. And I'm going to go back to my favorite black ink, which is the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, super black pigment ink. I always get good results. We're using regular paper here, not kind of a specialty glossy paper or anything, so this should stamp just fine. It's always good to make sure that your ink pad is nice and juicy when you're doing these silhouette images too. Just kind of stamping it out and try to make sure that there's no lines from the ink on there. All right, now our sun is placed perfectly. I love the little clouds. That was like a last minute throw in there. We're doing pretty good here. Have a little bit of texture, and I think that's just from the paper. What I'm going to try to do is, first I'm going to re-ink my stamp a little bit. So for those of you who've never re-inked a stamp before, I'll show you how easy it is. Just going to take a couple of quick lines. You don't want them to be super thick of the re-inker. And then I just take like an old gift card, credit card, hotel key card, whatever you have, and just kind of push that in there. And then just let that sit for a second so that it soaks it all in. And then while it's doing that, I'm going to clean my stamp off. This is also allowing this side of the stamped image to dry off a little bit so that the ink isn't pulling up. The wet ink isn't going to pull up. It'll set into the paper a little bit while we, again, just kind of clean this stamp off. And I just like my silhouette images to be completely covered as much as I can get them, as black as I can get them. I think they really look good that way. Not that there's anything wrong with this, but I think taking the time to stamp it a few times really makes a difference in how that card looks. Okay, so now we're going to go in with that, oh yeah, super juicy ink pad now. And also take into consideration, you know, what kind of media you're using, what kind of paper you're using. Last week's card, I used like a glossy kind of paper, and I know that when I use the VersaFine ink on there, because it's like a pigment ink, it sticks and it doesn't dry very quickly, so I switched over to the Brutus Monroe ink, and it worked great. So just look at the media that you're using, match your ink to your media, and that'll save you some headache as well. We're definitely doing a lot better. I think I'm going to do one more, and then that'll be it. And I'm going to give it a good CPR stamping here. I want to make sure that I get into there. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, for this image, it did come with a beautiful sentiment as well. The sentiment says, "There are far better things ahead than any we leave behind," by C.S. Lewis. And what you want to do, you can stamp that as a separate sentiment, which is nice. What I want to do on this card is I actually want to heat emboss it in white and put it down here instead of covering up our sky. So I need to dry this before I do that, because this ink being a pigment ink, if I try to put embossing powder on here right now, it's going to stick to everything. So we're going to take the heat tool and dry it. One of the other tips that I have when you're doing these silhouette images, you may have seen me do this before. Okay, when you have some light spots, I just take one of these little fantastic coloring tools. This is a bullet point. You can pick these up at Joann's. Your big box stores usually carry them, and they come like 3 or 4 in a pack, or any of the scrapbooking shows. But I will go in there, and anywhere that I just feel like, okay, that ink did not get in there, because again, I think it's just because of the little bit of texture in this paper. I'm just going to go in and fill that in. And because I'm using the same ink from the ink pad, it'll blend right in. Now I want to continue to dry this off. I don't want my embossing powder stick. Plus, because we use distress ink also stays a little bit wet, so we don't want any embossing powder sticking to that. if you want to test to see if it is dry or not, I'm going to take a little bit of your embossing powder. I'm using the Brutus Monroe Alabaster White Embossing Powder. Okay, see how that's still wet? That's not good. We want that to be completely dry. So this is not ready to be stamped on yet. So we're just going to keep on drying it. Before you dry it, make sure you got all the embossing powder off. You don't want any white specks on there. Okay. My anti-static tool. Put that down on here. Test it again. Still not dry. This is going to take a minute just because it is this pigment ink. And this is a specialty pigment ink. We should be pretty good now. This isn't dry by now. I think we're okay. Okay, really laying on that. And then I'm going to stamp with Versamark ink. Come on. So clearly still some areas here that are not completely dry, and that embossing powder will show if we go to heat it. So this one do a pretty good job at getting most of that off. Use a fine brush. Let me get one a little smaller. Now, if you had done this and it wasn't completely dry like mine, you could always brush it off, dry it, come back and stamp it again. For the sake of time, I'm going to continue to move forward. The other thing you can do is just stamp it on regular cardstock, cut it out, and put it on top. So there are a lot of things we can do to kind of get around some of these mistakes we made. I think I did okay with getting most of the embossing powder off, enough that we can heat it up. I mean, if you really wanted to be picky about it, you could go in there with a pokey tool, or like I have here, a little X-Acto knife, and get every little stray bit out of there. But I think we're okay here. It's as good as it's gonna get. And we're gonna heat this up and we'll be done. This down a little bit. So a piece of black cardstock. I am going to cut this down to slightly larger than 5 1/4 and slightly larger than 4. This down a little bit on the edges. Remember, I said this was originally 5 1/4 by 4, so we are going to just go down the 1/8 of an inch here. And any stray embossing powder that may have kind of gotten on there, you can pick off with your craft pick or use a sand eraser and get it off. And then for the powder tool, you just take a little cloth and wipe that off, and then I'll take off the powder tool. Just use some art glitter glue because it dries pretty quickly. Now, because this panel has a little bit of warping, I'm going to put glue on the whole panel instead of just on the outside edges. I'm going to line up my frame here. Pretty good. And then put it on your card front. I'm going to put this on a wide white card panel from Now, which is 5.5 by 4.25, so that when I'm ready to put it on a card front, it is ready to go. Okay, and then just put heavy blocks or acrylic stamping blocks on there to hold that down. So there we go, guys. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions about anything I used, I will post them in the description for you. Again, the name of this stamp is Better Things Ahead. This is from Blue Knight Rubber Stamps. And like I said, check out our blog. We have a new design team, so we have some new designs on there you guys can check out as well. And if you want to check out more, you can check me out at Nancy Stamps 15 on Instagram and also on Facebook. If you're new to my channel, click the little bubble and you will get notifications whenever I post a new video. And if you like this video, I always appreciate your thumbs up. Thanks for watching and keep on stamping. Bye-bye.